recording of the meeting will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting has concluded. We welcome the use of Welsh language at meetings. I have had no requests for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can members refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. Please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking. Please do not interrupt discussions until you have been notified of your intention to speak and you have been invited to do so. Moving on to the agenda. Agenda item 1, welcome and apologies. Chris, do we have any apologies?
Yes, we do, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Chris Tew.
Right. Item agenda 2, declarations of interest. Rebecca, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any interest to declare?
Thank you, Chair, of course. Councillor Ashley, I don't think is online now. Councillor Crick.
Sorry about that, my mute wasn't coming off. I'm not sure whether we should, because it covers the community council areas, whether we should include the fact that we're members of community councils. Rebecca?
I think that's fine, but we'll note it just in case, Councillor Crick. Thank you.
And thank you.
Okay, Councillor Evans?
Yeah, I'm the fire service has been involved. Yeah. All right, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Jenkins?
Nothing to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Fay-Jones?
I'm a member from Community Council.
Thank you. Councillor Nick Jones, I don't think is online. Councillor Killick?
Pontypool Community Councillor.
Thank you. And Councillor Thomas, please.
No, nothing at all, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Members, could you please state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If not, I will take them as agreed. Nothing? Okay. Rebecca, could you please run through the action sheet?
Thank you, Chair. So there are 2 actions listed on the action sheet. The first one is regards to the table of figures that you were given in the October meeting of the Prosperous Committee, looking at planning conditions in section 106 agreement. So those were emailed out to you last week. So unless members have any questions or feedback on those. No. And then the second action is the recommendations from the last committee, which again have been emailed out to you. Nothing further to add. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, I would like to welcome Kate Williams, Group Manager, Public Services Support Unit, who will be introducing the report today. I'd also like to welcome PC Sian Wigley, the Crime and Disorder Reduction Coordinator for Gwent Police. Thank you for attending today, and I can invite you to contribute to the discussions at any point. Simply raise your hand icon and I will invite you in. I will now hand over to Kate to give a brief introduction to the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually here in the Civic today with my colleague Kelly Williams. So nice to see everybody. So we'll do our best to try and answer any questions that you have. But I know you've received the report really, but we just wanted to bring this item to the Scrutiny Committee because it's a duty that is due to be enacted on all local authorities. At the time of the scrutiny basket about a year ago, we did believe that the duty would have been enacted by now, but actually what we wanted to do was still bring it to scrutiny so that we can have a discussion with you so that we can kind of stay ahead of the curve really to make sure that we're doing all that we can, that once the duty is enacted, that we've got everything in place to do that. We're joined as well, as you said this morning, by PC Sian Wigley. So Sian's part of our team as the Crime Disorder Reduction Officer. So we work very closely and hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions that you have this morning. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you very much. First question, is Nick online? Chris? Nick Jones?
Not at the moment, Chair, no.
Okay, I'll ask you first one then. The duty is still a proposed duty under the Police Crime Sentencing Courts Bill and has not yet been enacted. As an authority on which the duty will be placed, Have we have an opportunity to review the proposed duty and provide commentary before it is enacted? Will this duty create additional statutory requirements upon us, or is it a formalising work and actions we already undertaken?
Chair, sorry, Kate. Just before we start, I can see Councillor Nick Jones has joined now. Councillor Jones, that was the first question that was asked, which was your question. So I think Kate is going to answer that now. When members went through the declarations, they put declarations forward that they were community councillors. So I don't know if you wanted to put that forward as well.
Yes, I would like to, and it looks like I've still got problems getting in. Apologies, I'm probably going to have to switch this camera off. It's just not working. But yes, I declare for Community Council in Pontypool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Jones, for your question. So there was extensive consultation held that began in May 2019. So the government held a consultation on public health duty for tackling serious violence. So consulted a range of partners, all local authorities, obviously one of which was Torfaen County Borough Council. So yeah, we were involved in the consultation and submitted our responses of what we thought of the proposed duty, any issues that we thought it might have on resources, staffing, a whole host of things like that. So we did respond to that consultation, and that consultation then formed part of the amended duty going forward that has gone through government. It still hasn't been, there are still amendments to be made. So the report is the stages that it's at with government. It's had its third reading now, but there are still amendments to be made in that for that. So yeah, we fed in to that consultation. And the second part of your question, was it around resources? Sorry, was it? I missed that.
Let me have a look. Nick, do you want to come in with the second part, or do you want me to read it out?
Sorry, I'm just. Oh, hang on. I'm still having problems.
Will this duty create additional statutory requirements upon us, or is it formalising work and actions we are already taking? Is that the one, Kate?
Yes, thank you. So there will be a statutory duty for us to comply with the duty then. So that would come under the sphere of community safety. We have lots of mechanisms and that in place already that we would like to bolster on. We've got the community safety hub. So there's lots of things that we're already doing around this act and a whole host of community safety areas, not just serious violence, that I think that we could kind of bolster on rather than create a whole new industry of something of just concentrating on this. We've got the mechanisms, the staffing structures and that in place to be able to look at this, but it's making sure that we include all partners within that. So it may well be that we need to look at a standalone board that can kind of look at this, so that it's not just our community safety hub that's looking at this, but the community safety, the wider partners of the community safety partnership. So although there isn't a direct, perhaps financial cost to the council for doing this, it will require additional resources, and we'll have to kind of see what the how onerous that is on the teams. But if that becomes too challenging to be able to keep at that isn't something we might need to look at resources at a later stage.
Lovely. Anybody's hand up? No. Right. Okay.
Yes, thank you for that, Chair.
Councillor Kelly, I can see your hand. Yeah.
Yes. I probably suppose that there is this sort of tangential relationship to the police and crime panel, which I sit on. So I should probably have declared that. Kate, are there any sort of additional people that you would want that would not be on your community safety partnership? Because what you said previously seems to make a lot of sense, that there's no point in because whatever happens around violence, it's not an isolated thing. It relates to other areas. So what you were saying seems to make a lot of sense, that it is part of the whole community safety issue. So would there be additional people you'd want to import to that partnership to make that happen?
Yes, I think so, Councillor Killock. We've done lots of work with the third sector. There are organisations that are well equipped to do with this, organisations that we may wish to refer young people to. I know Kelly has done a lot of work with St Giles's Trust, and I'm sure Kelly would like to come in and talk perhaps about our partnership working in that with those. But I think it isn't just a standalone thing that we can do as community safety. There's so much expertise out there that we need to kind of draw to look at that. This touches very heavily on the ACEs agenda, prevention. There's a whole host of partners involved in this area that I think we need to ensure that we're tapping into specifically through the lens of serious violence. Even though we may work with those, we need our own standalone strategy that's going to involve additional partners. Did you want to say something about St Giles's Trust, Kelly?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my previous role, I was serious violence for Gwent, and within that it was I was working very closely with St Giles Trust, who's a charity with built-in experience. So they support workers, have actually been through some of the situations that our young people are going through at the moment, which just makes them a little bit more likely, I think, to engage with our young people who are going through such a lot that it is very difficult to engage with them. So that's something that we've certainly discussed, and I've discussed with St Giles as well, in terms of within the project that they actually are already funded for currently by the PCC and the Home Office, that we can sort of utilise some of that funding, which is built in reactive funding, which can come under what we need in Torfaen for now. But again, it will be further discussions, I think, as we go on. Unfortunately, as Kate has said, the duty is not currently enacted, which we were hoping it would be. But, once these things are made as they need to be and it is enacted, we can look at all the different partners that we need to have in there. And then additionally, at a sort of a lower level is Fearless. So a part of Crime Stoppers that is specifically for young people. We're looking at education under that same project by the PCC. To look at that awareness raising for schools, including the young people and pupils within the schools and the teachers, so that we've got a dual education programme going ahead through the schools that we need it to, preferably all secondary schools, although we are still in discussion, and also to educate the children on county lines, knife crime, serious violence. Reporting is very, very important. And obviously then it's as well, so they also understand the different avenues that they can go down should there be any disclosures from pupils.
So you'd just be able to, the Community Safety Partnership could just invite additional people to that partnership. That wouldn't cause any problem. I mean, it sounds like they have a bigger role to play than this anyway.
Yeah, and I think that we're already engaged with those partners, Councillor Killick, so we've got a good working relationship. We're not looking for new partners thinking, how, we haven't got any contacts with drug support services or something. We've got a lot of those contacts anyway, so I think it's just focusing on those that network and just including them more through this lens and that really. But I don't see that being an issue at all.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks both.
Okay, Faye, you got your hand up?
Apologies, Chair, I'm late getting in.
Okay, Stu, we have missed you.
I'm sure you have, yes.
Yeah, thanks for that. I just want to carry on from what John was just asking, and that's basically the wideness of the remit, because when you're talking about prevention of serious crime, I mean, the age you can start at, the younger the better. So obviously you can't have this too wide and then include too many different people in this, or too many different parts of education. You have to probably just go with the secondary education. But are you confident that your secondary schools are in touch with their feeders, and that if you need to have meetings that include other sectors of the community, they're there to have, and working with primary schools and things as well? And are you also confident that you've got enough charities and third sector organisations on board to do work with individuals to stop the spread of serious violence and to perhaps stop it before it starts? It's a huge remit.
It is huge, Councillor Jones, you're right there. And I think one of the things that, we brought to scrutiny before is our MAPI process, our multi-agency pupil intervention process. And when we started that initiative, it was in comprehensive schools, and it was too late. We were missing so many children coming through there, so many families we were missing, siblings, partner, all of those kind of things. We were just, it was too late. We weren't able to engage at an early enough stage. So the MAPIs now are in pretty much all primary schools, so we have that really good link then for feeder schools going into comprehensive, the transition year, looking at families, siblings, and those that may be drawn for the antisocial behaviour arena. But actually, a lot of the work that we're doing through the serious violence partners and looking at those, it's definitely the ACEs and the work that the team does. If we're working with a young person that's brought to our attention, a lot of the profiling work that they will do then is actually, well, who do they live, who are they engaged with, are they younger siblings that are going to be coming through? So the team are, hats off to them, are amazing at finding those young people that could potentially come into this arena. And I think that's will be a huge focus on prevention. Is once somebody's within the realms of an organised crime group, it's really difficult to get them out. So much of the work that we're doing and partners that we're working with is that prevention, making sure that they don't go in that route, making sure that there's other things for them to do in the community, places to go, people to talk to, one-to-one mentoring support. There's so much that's needed there. There isn't enough of that. I'm not sure if we'll come on to perhaps talk about resources and what we need as a team, but it's those interventions that we need to be pushing. Did you want to add anything on that? I think that's, a lot of the preventative work, isn't it? That's what the team are doing to try to engage at that really early stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to sort of where we tie in the primary schools to the secondary schools through those MAPI meetings, although COVID did, become a bit of a barrier during that time, but what we do have is towards the end of the school year, we do have a MAPI where we invite the secondary school into the primary school feeders MAPI. So we tend to group the MAPIs for primary schools into their feeder groups. So we have then the representative from our MAPI in the secondary school to come into that last meeting prior to that transitional period over the summer to make sure that we have all those sort of things in place ready for that child, both for the summer, for the extra transition with play service, moving over to perhaps positive futures, and then making sure that the schools, the secondary schools, are fully aware, not just with a file that's perhaps been sent over, but a face-to-face discussion and a confidential meeting as well. So I hope that answers the question, Councillor.
Yes, thank you for that. That does answer the question. And I'm sure you have good links in with social services if early family work needs to be done, and that other agencies can be brought in through them as well. Because I suppose it's such a huge, huge agenda, I'm thinking. But thank you for that. That's very reassuring. Thank you.
Are you on mute, Councillor Jenkins?
You're on mute, Gwen.
Oh, you're right there. Nick, you put it back down. Have you got a question? On again, are you?
No, I am still here. I don't have a hand up.
Oh no, it did come up, but he went back down. Right. Okay, I think that's it. There's nothing else there. Next question will be, to what extent are we already carrying out preventative work?
So I think really we've touched on some of the work that the team does. We link very heavily with, as Kelly's just mentioned, with Positive Futures. We work with youth support services, with the youth offending service. So there's lots of work that we do within the prevention arena. So some of the work could include, early engagement with families. We could possibly link in with families first. There's a whole host of things available to us to look at prevention. But as Kelly alluded to, through lockdown and that, it's been really difficult to keep these services engaged. And I would say that is the one thing that yeah, we haven't got enough of. There are not enough prevention services that we could refer children and young people to look at these kind of issues. So although we utilise prevention services, one of the issues we have with our MAPI meetings now, multi-agency pupil intervention meetings, is that there's so many children that require support. They need intervention, and the interventions aren't there. There aren't enough there for us to refer them to. So actually, I know the team are at these meetings trying to figure out what are you going to be able to do with things, but Positive Futures, youth offending services. They're so under-resourced to be able to do this, and the children and young people that we're seeing now since lockdown, there's a whole host of new issues that are coming in that I don't personally feel that we're getting on top of enough. There's lots of support that's needed. So although we do lots of preventative work, it's not enough, and I think we do need to look at how best we look for additional resources to support prevention services.
Thank you. Anybody's hand up? Can't see anyone. Councillor Crick, next question.
Yes, thank you, Gwyn. Kate, you've already touched on this, but just for clarity, looking at paragraphs 3.4 and 3.5, are the specified authorities that you refer to in 3.4 the same as those listed in 3.5? How do we already work and meet with these agencies to reduce serious violence in Torfaen? You've obviously got the community safety hub, but what else is there? This is really just for clarity for when we come to do our reporting back.
Sure, thank you, Councillor Crick. So a lot of those, the police, the South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, health colleagues, and that sit on our community safety hub, the youth offending services. I'd say the one area that perhaps we're not as linked into that we would need to be are probation services. So I think that's, although that they're referenced there, actually that isn't something that we do as on a regional approach through the I'm going to say Safer Gwent. We're trying to change the name of it, but it's really hard for me not to say Safer Gwent all now. The Gwent Safer Communities Board, those partners sit there on a regional basis, so that although we are linked in with them on that, I think there is something more through the duty then that we're going to need to ensure that we are better linked in with probation services, which I think we're not quite there yet. Thank you.
Okay, anybody?
Yeah, that's quite worrying, really. Is there anything you feel we can push to help with that?
I think that the doors are open. We've had conversations, we work with probation and those things, but unless there's perhaps, a strategy that we're trying something directly to do, the antisocial behaviour side of things that we're involved in, a lot of that becomes in the sort of the pre-criminal space. So a lot of the work that we're doing is trying to keep people out of prisons and those kind of things. So I think, a lot of the work we do are with younger people, but then I know, Kelly, there's adults and that have come back into the community that have come out of prison that, Sian and Kelly and the team are doing that work with probation in that respect, and those services to perhaps support those people and communities around that. But I think we've got the links. I don't think it's an issue to say, well, actually we don't know who to contact and that, but it's just bringing them into this arena a bit more. So they don't sit on our community safety hub, but as a partnership for this, we would need to engage with them more.
Okay.
Councillor Killick.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm guessing, Kate, that you're not awash with members of staff in your section, so where I'm going to with this is that there are times when the borough council isn't able to make applications for external funding, which a community council has greater flexibility to do. I'm just wondering whether once we're into the new rounds of new councils, whether it might be worth you coming and talking about your work in general with a specific link to this, in order that we might be able to look to see. We're not going to be able to pay for a member of staff out of our precept. I mean, let's not beat about the bush. But there are times when it is just impossible for a borough council to apply for money where we might be able to.
Absolutely, Councillor Killick. I think we'll be knocking on your door, because I think a lot of the things that we need to do is that we've just said around prevention services. So although we may have staff, and I do have to say to Torvine, we've got the best resourced community safety team in Gwent. We've got the it's gold standard, I think, for what we've got in Torvine, that other councils haven't resourced into that. They haven't put core funding in. There are a few funded staff through the Police and Crime Commissioner or through Welsh Government, but actually they haven't got the resources that Torvine has stayed invested in community safety because of the returns, because of the impact and that the team have. But what they are lacking then is because of the volume of work, and is trying to find those prevention services and that I think additional funding. And funny enough, Kelly and I were chatting about this before our meeting this morning, where there's the round 4 of the Safer Streets Fund is coming available now. This is the thing we need to be looking at, but there's a whole host, like you say, perhaps a kind of funding that's out there available that we're, as the local authority, not able to do, but can look to the community council then to support in writing a bid together. So we'd really welcome coming to meet you all to talk about what the team does, because I know how much the community councils engage and know local communities and stuff as well. So we'd really welcome that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Nobody's held out there. Stuart, you got the next question?
Chair, before Councillor Ashley asks his question, during the declarations, members put declarations forward that they were community council members. I don't know if Councillor Ashley might want to say that as well.
Yes, I'm community councillor in Cwmbran, and I think I met Kate down there thinking about it. You've been to Cwmbran a few times. So following on from what John said, that would be a welcome down there, because we welcome it. We've had you also down in the community down there talking about this very issue, funnily enough. So yes, I would agree with John on that. I'll put my question. I'm sorry about the lateness. I was actually dealing with a piece of casework, strangely enough, related to this. It happened, and you can't help it happening. So, right, 3.7 it is. I realised there was a number there, Rebecca. There is flexibility for specific authorities in local areas to take account, including their strategy, actions which focus on other related types of serious violence. That's the quote. Are these other types of serious violence of significant occurrence in Torvine to need to be covered in our strategy? You got that one?
Yeah.
It is 3.7, so it's there in black and white.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ashley. So I think because the duty hasn't been enacted, there isn't anything prescriptive around what they do. And with these, I think we're waiting for guidance and that to come out. Actually, a lot of the time, the guidance doesn't really come out, and they say, well, it's over to you. This is the duty. Do it as you see fit. And then we say, OK, we'll carry on doing what we're doing and try to make it work as best possible, really. But I think what we would need to do that then is use the Gwent strategic assessment that we work with the police analyst. And some of the information from the analyst is included in the statistics and that for the borough. But we need to look, what are our main drivers? Is it knife crime? Is it domestic violence? Those are the things that we need to unpick, and we need to make our strategy work for Torvine, not just for Gwent. At the moment, we're looking at lots of regional things, but what we need to do more so, I think, is unpick the types of violence that occurs, and are we doing enough? It could be that the violence against women, domestic abuse, and serious violence by the RSV, I think, we're very much linked in with those partnerships, and it could well be that the Serious Violence Prevention Board then would say, well, actually, that piece of work is already being done. We're satisfied with that, so we don't need to perhaps include it and do more work on that. But I think we definitely need to kind of unpick a lot of that work. Look, it's all happening, but it's not under this umbrella as the serious violence duty. So that is something I think that we need to look at. We receive monthly antisocial behaviour crime packs, and that includes a whole host of information that we look at and we unpick, and the team goes through those then each month and say, right, what are our hotspot areas, what crimes are flagging up. So lots of this work we do anyway, but I think through the lens of serious violence we would need to unpick what we're looking at that, because if it's too massive, I know terrorism isn't included, but if we're trying to get this to look at domestic violence and everything, we could be focusing on too many areas that we just need to focus on the key areas that matter for Torfaen and target those first.
Yeah, Chair, can I come back there if I may, please?
Yeah, of course you got it.
I put my hand up. Doesn't matter. Yeah, you say about unpicking. I mean, some of us are sat in on the a PSB, the regional PSB, and obviously there are other 4I. So, bearing in mind what you've just said, there's a big spread of it. If you were, when you get, or if you're going to get, what are going to be your key indicators, key areas? Because I think that's a standard scrutiny question you're going to get asked. I've just asked it.
Well, I think, most, the violence without injury, I just think that there's lots of different things that we would, we could look at then, and without, I think, looking at the individual stats on that, the focus may change. So I think what... No,
I'm just asking for you. I mean, obviously, we didn't get it out, the stats that came with this, but what, from your point of view in your department, what are your areas of concern? Just keep it nice and simple. What are you looking for?
I think, youth violence, actually, what young people are, becoming more violent, the fear, I think, of knife crime, that's a huge issue for young people. Not necessarily that people are all carrying knives, but actually young people are genuinely do not feel safe because they feel that there is a level of violence, and I think our main focus is around youth violence, youth disorder, and the effect that that's having kind of on communities and the fear of crime. So I'd say that was our main area.
You've got about 3 in there, but can you unpack those a little bit, please?
Youth violence.
But nothing with the general community there, because when I sit on the community council, going back to that one again, that fear of crime also seems to be one that have, but it's not just, is it youth or is it other things as well?
No, I'd say that's our main focus. That's
okay. That sounds great. I'll leave it there.
Okay.
Thank you, Stu. Anybody's hand up? No, right, we'll move on. Councillor Nick Jones, you've got a question for us?
Yes, I was just trying to fire the camera up and see if it's going to work. It looks, unfortunately, as if it is. Yes, I'll read my question, but I want to frame it as well. Defining violence, at what point does crime become violent and covered by this duty? Can types or aspects of antisocial behaviour be classed as serious violence? An awful lot of this, I really must apologise, you've possibly covered in my in the answer to my question 1. And some of the already answers that you've given, but if you could just try and have a stab at that. It was really we were trying to find out at what point does it become violent, or serious violence, I should say.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Some of the statistics that have been included in the report, it doesn't really say what that is. Is it, what is violence? Is this, is it abuse? Is it somebody shouting? All of those kind of things. So, unpicking that is definitely something that we need to kind of look at. And if it's okay, Sian, could I bring you in there just to talk around the actual categorically what is classed as violence and how this kind of moves with that? Would that be okay?
Yeah, not a problem. Morning, Chair. Morning, all. From a police perspective, crime recording has changed quite significantly over the past few years. Everything has to be ethically and recorded in certain ways. Violence can be anything from a Facebook post where there's no actual physical contact in any way, all the way up to Section 18's wounding, GBH, and obviously murder. But it's so vast that you've obviously, in those figures that you've received this morning, the violence with and without injury has gone up significantly recently due to the fact that we're recording a lot of the ASB as violence due to groups of views which could make somebody feel intimidated. That is classed as violence. From a crime recording perspective, I'm not quite sure, obviously, in the wider community that they would automatically think that was violence, but from a police recording perspective, that could be anything from somebody saying an abusive text on a text message, a Facebook post, a Snapchat, all the way up to physical and personal violence, including domestic violence and neighbours' disputes, arguments over parking. All those things are classed as violence from a police perspective. Does that help at all, or do you need further clarification?
I'd like to come back in, if I might, on that, actually. And I think that's the nub of the question that we were trying to ask. There are so many things that are classed as violence.
Yes.
And it covers the whole wide range of acts against people and against property. What we were trying to tease out from this, at what point does it become serious? Because they're all violence. Now, this act has got the word serious in it.
Yes.
I didn't quite hear the answer to question one, because we were also quite concerned, and I'm sure the answer was answered properly, as to whether this is a completely new act or whether it's a catch-all for all of the other things that we are doing, or whether this is a separate piece of work looking at a particular area of violence. So yes, I mean, I'll go back to that again. When does violence become serious? Particularly with regard to this act, specifically.
It's a very grey area, and it's dependent on such as things as domestic violence. I would have thought high-risk domestic violence doesn't have to be actual physical harm, whereas more, if you're thinking in the crime statistics from a normal person's sort of look, when you look at it, it would be anything from where you've received injury, sort of from a Section 47 actual bodily harm upwards. From you could kick somebody repeatedly in the head, and they have no injuries, and it will be crimed as a Section 39 common assault and a battery. But if somebody was watching that, you would say that was a serious violence. So it's from my perspective, I think it's very grey. I'm not sure where the serious violence title came from, or I haven't had any updates in relation to where that has come from. So I'm not sure what the definition is specifically, but I do note that the statistics that you've been sent are with and without violence. So where it on those parameters it becomes non-violent to serious violence, I'm not sure on that scale where it would come. So from my perspective, I'm not sure if I can answer that question fully.
Okay, well, thank you for having a stab at it, because obviously this is the problem that we have, as a council, because it's a duty that's being put on us. And I'm sure it's a question that will be asked repeatedly to know as to whether there's a piece of work that deals with violence, and there's an obligation as a council that deals with violence, and then there's a separate obligation that deals with serious violence. Do we have to record them in a different way? How do we actually demonstrate, particularly as a committee, that we're actually complying with that duty? I'm sure an awful lot of it will come out in the in the next couple of months when the Act is is fully in place, and I would seriously hope that someone might define it for us. But thank you for having a go at that. I'm sure that you love statistics, and and if it wasn't for statistics, perhaps we might have more time tackling crime, but that's a different issue. But no, we'll come on to statistics afterwards because we've got some questions on that, and I won't ask them now. But thank you very much for trying. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Nick. We got two hands up. I believe, Faye, you were first.
Thank you. Just a thought. I was a victim of a very serious, it felt very violent road traffic act where we were knocked into minding our own business by somebody who was on drink and drugs and way over the limit, and the car was then, I suppose, accidentally used as a you know, a something of danger which caused us violence. Would that be recorded in the serious violence statistics? I think not. I'd like to know.
So it would depend on the circumstance. So I'm guessing that the other person it was their car, it was insured, and all that. Is that the case?
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just quickly say, obviously the meeting is being webcast, so I'm just conscious that you're discussing a specific case here. It might be appropriate.
I think it would only, just for clarification, if the car was taken, was stolen and driven in a manner that was aggravated, that would be classed as some sort of violence. But from what you've described to me, I don't think it would have been. It would have been classed as a traffic incident. Sorry, I'm just going to have to go off. Somebody's just done an emergency call. I just to clarify that they don't require any assistance. Stand by.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm interested in that because obviously it's a violent outcome, and you know, if we're thinking of prevention, we need to look at many different types of prevention in order to stop violence from happening, and that involves a lot of money and of course a lot of that being cut. But that was just my point, really. Okay, thank you.
Well, John, you only asked a question now, will you?
Yeah. The question Nick asks is such a good one. The problem in it is, we could end up spending the whole of this meeting discussing where the borderline is. And I'm just wondering if, with regards to things like the Community Safety Partnership, it could just say we are responsible for looking at serious violence, but in terms of this partnership, we consider any violence to be serious, and that's what we're dealing with, because that ends the debate then. Otherwise, we end up almost navel gazing about whether it is or it isn't. It's a really useful question. Just a way to get rid of it seems to be the most useful way out.
Yeah, and I think as Sean alluded to, what's violence to one person, what's acceptable, is not, isn't it? It's how the victim is perceived. We do lots of work, going off topic, sorry, but with hate crime. But is it a hate incident? Is it a hate crime? Or how does that person feel that they perceive that, whatever? So I think that's a lot of the work that we need to do that, and it is around raising awareness. A lot of the work that we're doing links very much in with our organised crime groups, so for us, when we looked at serious violence, we're thinking that is serious, that is knives, that's that it's that kind of violence. But actually, when you're categorising it and it's all the catch all that's underneath, you're thinking, well, it's going to be quite hard to kind of get those statistics down if it includes all. So I think, what we would need to do then is unpick that data and have a bit of a benchmark to kind of say the issues that we're looking at are something with a weapon, the injury that's caused, that is something that maybe we'll look at, and through guidance with a duty, maybe that'll be a bit more specific. But we don't know. But I do agree, it just covers everything at the moment. And you think, well, that's quite hard to tackle everything, isn't it? So.
Yeah, it does. And if I may, I'm also an associate member of the Violence Prevention Unit for Wales. And I do know that they were doing some work around defining serious violence, because they have been in place for, I believe, 2 years now. And I was a member from the beginning in my previous role as well. So, part of our plan as well in terms of this duty is to speak to John Drake from the Violence Prevention Unit for Wales, and discuss what their definition is going to look like, or does look like, and potentially speak to our partners within Gwent and further afield within Wales, and ensure that we are all working from the same same definition really, because, we do also work with a lot of people and youths and older people that do tend to go over sort of borders and different things. So a consistent approach, I think, would be absolutely key. But as Sian and Kate have both said, it is at the moment quite grey, but it is something that we do have a plan to look at, both on a Torfaen and a Wales footprint, really.
I guess I'm just worried, Kelly, that more time is spent defining it than is spent on dealing with it. Yeah.
I think we need to, rest assured, we are doing this anyway. This isn't something that we're waiting to do. We do this day in, day out. This is, this is part of what the team does, whatever, so this isn't something that just go, oh no, how are we going to look at, they're doing this. So I think, we wouldn't want to get caught up in that kind of thing. But actually, if we've got a terms of reference, a strategy, whatever, it would be lovely to have a shiny line. This is. We can hope.
Okay. Next hand up is Stuart Ashley. Nick, we should go.
Yes, I have, Chair.
Okay.
I just wanted to add to this because it seemed to me the obvious place to go. We get on scrutiny all the time, whichever committee we are, about a legal definition on this, because that would, you guys, as you said, do it all the time, and it would be very simple to have my learned friend, because they get paid to do all this. And I know as much as you do it, it seems to me obvious. The definition seems to be the serious and defined in terms of violence and serious violence. I'm not going to go any further than that because John's smiling, I can see that. And I don't want to get in further than this because we've got a load more questions, but that would seem to be the problem. You guys, as I said, you've just said you have to live with it all the time. And that would seem to be the simple semantics. I'm starting to sound like a theologian, which I did have a bit of training on. And once you get into that one, you can be there all day, as John said. It's a simple thing. But that would help.
Thank you.
Okay. Nick?
Yes, I will keep this brief. I'm totally with Councillor Killick on this, and I do feel for your department. Can I just clarify? And you probably have answered this. We are getting a bit tied up in the in the words. As a council, do we have to separate them? Do we have a duty for violence, and do we have a duty for serious violence? Because if they aren't split in the periods, in the pieces of work, then what Councillor Killick is suggesting is a very sensible suggestion, and we can just look at violence as being violence.
Again, we don't really know what the Act is the duty is going to say. It just says serious violence, and the definition that they've given. Looking at my notes, the purpose of this duty, violence includes violence against the property and threats of violence. It does not include terrorism. The serious violence strategy included homicide, violence against a person, knife crime, gun crime, areas of criminality where serious violence or its threat is inherent. So again, it's so huge. So I think they've kind of done a whole catch-all within that. So unpicking, is it serious? Is it violent? Maybe that's something we need to look at for ourselves, but I don't think it's clear at this point.
Just to try and help me pick it out, and I'm very sorry to come back at this again, do we currently have a duty around violence?
Well, we've got, under the Crime and Disorder Act, we've got a statutory responsibility to reduce antisocial behaviour, to safeguarding, all of those kind of things. There's lots of things that we have a duty and a due regard to ensure that people are safe in our community. So there's lots of other acts that this would come under to safeguard children, adults, under those kind of duties. But actually this is a new duty that what they, I think, predominantly are looking at is to enable those key partners, for example, the ambulance service, to share data when there has been a violent crime. There has been, are we linking in with those? Are we looking at the statistics? Are we engaged in the same people in that? So I think this duty wants to bolster that partnership work and that multi-agency approach of letting us share information without data protection issues, and that I think that is the key thing that comes under this. We do a lot of it, all of that stuff anyway. We're looking at that through our, our duties under the Crime and Disorder Act, our Section 17 responsibilities for the whole council to ensure that, people are safe and not brought into with crime and antisocial behaviour. We do that, so it's incorporated in that. We wouldn't look at something and say, oh, well, actually, that's serious violence. That's not included in the work that we're doing. We naturally do that, and the governance arrangements and our statutory responsibilities as the council anyway. But I think this duty wants to bolster the sharing of information and the data and that around that.
Okay, that's probably quite helpful, because usually if a new act comes in, you can say, right, okay, these are things we were doing, those have now moved to this new act, and we're left with these things, which are then covered by other duties that we currently have. So it's usually just a division of duties that we already do, to be able to record them for statistics in a slightly different way, so we can actually have a look at them and focus maybe on the more serious of things. So I understand the difficulty that we've got, and it would seem from what you're saying is that we're going to have a new recording of a particular strand of what we already do, and we're going to report, and we're still going to continue having those safeguarding issues and the prevention issues under other duties. And we're very mindful of not creating extra work for your department without extra resource. And I know that you'll find the way around this in the months to come, and we wish you luck with this, and I'm sure that it'll become a little bit clearer as to what is meant by this, in the time to come. But yes, you're quite right. We've spoken enough about the definition. So yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. If I could just kind of come back in there, the Crime and Disorder Act, from 1998 has, it's moved on now. There were statutory responsibilities under there that the council had to adhere to reduce reoffending, to reduce domestic violence, reduce antisocial behaviour. Well, since then, there's a whole host of new duties that are coming into there that talks about modern slavery, serious violence. I think, as time is moving on, the legislation is moving on, and I think it's just ensuring that the already existing duties encapsulates this area as well, so that we're overseeing the duty as well, that it's recognised perhaps in its own right under existing legislation.
Yes, thank you for that. That probably answers the second part of the question, which was kind of types or aspects of antisocial behaviour be classed as serious violence. That's because very often that level of I don't want to call it petty crime. I really don't want to, because it's very serious, because it leads on to other things, and it's usually the precursor to more serious things further on. So again, it's about trying to split this up into the prevention issues and the prevention being not to escalate into other forms of behaviour which can be far more violent. So yes, thank you for that. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Crick, can this be the last one now on this topic?
Thank you. Just going back to the definition of violence and the different levels, had you looked at the Magistrates' Court's guidelines? Because, that does give some clarity as to where it becomes suitable for the Magistrates' Courts or has to go up to the higher court because it's considered too serious to be dealt with by the magistrates. As Sian, I'm sure you will be familiar with that.
From a police perspective, sort of Section 20's grievous bodily harm, in Section 20 and Section 18 assaults would go to the Crown Court, and anything higher than that, most likely anything from a 47 actual body harm, 39 common assault would be in the magistrates.
Yes, unless it's considered so serious. I think it might be useful for you to have a look at it, Kelly, if you haven't already done so, because it does cover so many of these crimes you're talking about.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor. And I think Just a little bit, well, another spanner in the works, I suppose, in terms of, part of the duty will be the serious violence reduction orders that they are looking at. And they are, from what I can see from the duty at the moment, before if there are any further amendments, it does look like that will be a civil order. So again, you're looking at, I'm just sort of reading my notes here, is, individuals, including if they knew or ought to have known that somebody had a knife or would use a knife, could also be looking at a potential order. So yeah, absolutely, I do agree. We definitely will take a look at that in more depth in terms of, where it goes from magistrates to the Crown Court, but bearing in mind that these are civil orders as well included in the duty. Yes. So just to have sort of an overarching, view of it as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. Veronica, you got the next question?
Yes, thank you. Again, this is looking at 4.1.2, where you talk about regional partnership working arrangements. Can you explain to us exactly what regional partnership working arrangements have been established so far and what you envisage being established in the future?
Yeah, thank you. So we alluded to earlier the Gwent Safer Communities Board. So that's, as I said, like an overarching community safety partnership for Gwent. That's got all the statutory partners on, and anyone that needs to be included within this duty already sit on that partnership board. So I chair that group. Catherine Jones is the regional coordinator. She's also based within the Torvine team. So we're heavily involved in that regional work across Gwent. With the formation of the Gwent Public Service Board, we were, for a long time now, have been looking to ensure that the public service boards know exactly what is happening with community safety. And I'm really pleased to say that one of the first areas that the Regional Partnership Board wanted to look at was community safety. So they've held a workshop before Christmas and have requested that the Gwent Safer Communities Board conduct a review of community safety in Gwent, what it looks like, how teams are resourced, what each area is doing. So I think that the work that we're doing regionally is second to none, isn't it, Kelly? I think we really, as a Gwent region, then I think we work collaboratively with lots of different partners. Our community safety hub was the first one in Gwent to be established, and we're the flagship Charles nodding her head because we know it's the best one in Torvine. But lots of the other local authorities have come to us then of how they can better hold partnership hubs and that. So I think there's lots of work that we do regionally. We meet as community safety leads once a week. We talk about all the things that are, the serious violence duty, everything that's coming in, any new legislation. So I'd say, yeah, the regional partnership working is really great in Gwent.
Stuart, you got your hand up? You're on mute, Stu.
To say that we recently scrutinised the regional PSB. There's an inordinate amount of work in there. I'm glad to hear there was 400 pages on that with about 1,000 links in. I did briefly see that. Just to say it's a hell of a lot of work in 2.5 hours like we're doing here. If you need to bring that back to council, that would be welcome because there's so much work in that regional stuff. I'm glad to hear what you had to say about it. As I said, we did briefly see it, but bearing in mind there was a chair and a couple of other chairs. If you need to bring that back, please do, because I hear what you say and we're well aware of what you're saying there. But please make sure you do bring that back because it's such a lot of detail. Lyndon was very hard pressed to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ashley. And I think a lot of the work that the remit of the Public Service Board is huge. I mean, we're talking about community safety and the statutory responsibilities under community safety. They're huge. That's just a tiny section of the Public Service Board. So what we've tried to say with the Gwent Safer Communities Board is don't worry about community safety. Leave that to this board. We'll look at all aspects of there. We'll work with the area planning board. We'll work with the Vital SB team. The youth offending services. We'll kind of bring all this together and conduct a review and ways that we can, better work under community safety. So I think the PSB will quite believe that there is already a partnership in existence that could look at that element and then could go to the Regional Public Service Board and say, this is your annual report that covers everything on community safety, So, yeah, that work is well underway.
If the Chair just beg my indulgence a minute, indulge me a minute. You are pretty fly at bringing things back to seminar as well, and please keep doing that, because that's the sort of thing we do need to know, because, as I said, there's a lot of detail in that PSB, which scrutiny does an executive summary, and we go through that. It's a lot of detail, and I mean, the thing that came out of scrutiny, which I hope they accept, was it's a work in progress. And I think that's true of what we're doing now, but that very much so. So I think that's a good piece of work in there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. I think you've got the next question.
I have indeed. 4.14, we are seeing better levels of engagement with St Giles Trust than we may see with our community safety team. Are we seeing, sorry, I should have left the R off. Are we seeing better levels of engagement with St Giles Trust than we may see with our community safety hub or with the police? It's a question.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of St Giles Trust, as I've mentioned, they do have support workers who have lived through some of the things that our children within Torfaen are currently going through, or similar situations. And what we do find is those children who are a little bit more hard to reach, or a little bit further down the line in terms of whether that be exploitation or whether that be something different in whatever it is that they need. If it is criminal behaviours that we are seeing, St Giles Trust and their support workers have been absolutely great in sort of engaging those hard to reach young people. So we have a lot of partners, as Kate has alluded to previously, who are very, very good at engaging with young people and steering them on to perhaps a better path, so to speak. But with those more hard to reach children who have perhaps suffered, a lot of ACEs in their lives, and experiences haven't been, as good as maybe we would hope for them. St Giles Trust support workers, because they do have that built-in experience, are able to speak on a level that perhaps you or I may not be able to engage with those children. And I think sometimes the trust from the young person is then a little bit easier to give. So in terms of, I suppose, in terms of answering your question, it's on two levels, really. We do have partners that engage very, very well with children, but sometimes those more hard to reach children, St Giles Trust, really do hit the mark in terms of trying to engage with them.
I was going to come back, if I may, Chair. One of the questions that came up at scrutiny, you would, and partners, I'm assuming people like the other agencies, you've got other agencies around. I'm thinking CCYP, which I am a member of, board member of. You've got victim support and a whole lot of other agencies, which I know you've mentioned in the past. But this one is very much specialist at the sort of thing you just described. So there's quite a lot. What level of agencies have you got working with you? As the question I was going to ask as a supplementary.
Sure. So I think lots of those agencies that you've just mentioned, victim support, they sit on our community safety hub. Yeah. They're part of that. When we had at the physical office, when we were based in Pontypool Police Station, victim support would come in. They would come in and work with the team. So we've got really good connections with that. All with the youth support services, CCYP, the youth service, YOS, Positive Futures, work really closely in that with the team. So those kind of partners, Welsh Ambulance Service, they come to the hub. They would sit in the meeting. The South Wales Fire and Rescue, they often would just come in and be part of that team. So
there's a whole host of them.
Yeah, absolutely, a whole host. And that.
Yeah.
We have
possibly a women's aid and people like that as well.
Women's aid, yeah. They also sit on the the Community Safety Hub. So I think a lot of the people, because the success of the meetings, the partners are hearing about that and are often kind of saying, I think we had a request last week to say, please can we come to the hub? This is the sort of work that we're doing. We want to engage with partners around that. I mean, Kelly, you attend hub meetings. There's lots of partners there.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to do? Would they be up for being detailed on this report?
What's that? Sorry.
Would they be up for being mentioned on this report?
How do you mean mentioned? Sorry.
Well, they're not mentioned, and it would be useful to know who they were if that was able.
Well, that's in relation to the Community Safety Hub, so that's a bit separate to this. Although that's its own thing. We have a data sharing agreement with a whole host of partners. So we're happy to share the list of partners that are included in the WASPI around who's included in the hub. So yeah, that's no problem at all. But it wouldn't form part of this report. But happy to share that information anyway.
Yeah, no, it's just that the questions around it, because I mean, one of the future questions, some of the future questions, I'm not going on to them, but knowing who you're working with, St Giles sounds really, really good, and we at least as a council can support their, what they're doing, and it just seems knowing who they are is for councillors is a really good thing.
Absolutely, and it may be something that members may wish. There was a member seminar yesterday. On counter-terrorism stuff, so this may be something, an avenue that members wish to suggest, to say actually we would like to know more about this, the partners that are involved.
You got it.
Come into a seminar, we could get St Giles in to talk about the work that they're doing. It'd be really interesting, because the work that they do is amazing, the impact that they have on children and families. So by all means, if that's something that's
you work with a lot of partners, and we've already had Women's Aid and people like that in. You've had a whole breadth of them in, haven't you? Yeah,
absolutely. So if that's something that you want to pursue, I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay, Stu.
Thanks, Chair. But I just thought that was really important to know who they are, because they do different things, and they fit in this one as well as your other stuff you do.
Okay, Faye.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, how long have we worked with St Giles Trust, and where does their funding come from? Thank you.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, so our previous role was Serious Violence Lead for Gwent. So that was when we first really started working with St Giles Trust. And it was around the same time that the Violence Prevention Unit was sort of made. So probably around 2, maybe 3 years maximum. The funding is through, for Torfaen, is through a Gwent funding through the OPCC. And that is due to be renewed, as you would expect, really due for April. So hopefully, that will continue. But yeah, as it is at the moment, Torfaen don't actually fund St Giles Trust. It is a Gwent funded. It is a Gwent funded system, really, and it's a project around serious violence where St Giles Trust and the Fearless from Crime Stoppers are also involved. So that's where that comes from at the moment.
Thank you. Do you see any problems with funding streams with this, or are we hopeful that we can keep things like this going?
I think with the one thing that this duty will have is shine a spotlight on those agencies that need to be involved in this. You can't implement a new duty without resources, and so even if it doesn't come directly from the council to the Police and Crime Commissioner, we touched on the Safer Streets Fund. I think there's lots of the Youth Endowment Fund was one. There's lots of funding opportunities, I think, to look at that we need to ensure then that we are employing these agencies to do a lot of the work. But the one thing I think that there is a risk of, it's never long term. There's a funding bid, it's a year, it's 2 years, year on year we apply. Kelly's post is part funded through the Police and Crime Commissioner, it's part funded by Welsh Government. Every year we're trying to, we put on our funding, but again, we think it's going to happen, but actually the rug could be pulled at any time, and that long-term sustainable funding is something that I think is missing, whereas I don't think it will be taken in the interim, actually if something else kind of comes up, something does go, isn't it? And there is a fear then that those agencies won't be funded because funding needs to be elsewhere. So I do see that as an issue, and I see that as a long-term issue that does need addressing.
Thank you for that. Yes, it's such a pity. Many agencies have come and gone, haven't they? And third sector work is hard and often underfunded. And it's concern with, funding to local authorities and things. But thank you for that anyway.
Is your hand still up, Stuart, or have you still got to put it down? You're muted. You're muted, Stu. Stuart, you're muted.
Talking about resource implications, I'm hesitant to ask this question, but as it's come up here, who is responsible down the Welsh Government for overseeing this thing? Because obviously, if they're expecting a duty under this Act, then they must have an oversee the resource implications, which is the usual story we have.
To be honest, Councillor Ashley, I'm not quite sure the minister that this comes under.
That's the one I want to know. You don't know?
No, I don't. Sorry, I don't really know.
That would be a question for scrutiny to find out, wouldn't it?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Crick, next question.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at 4.1.4, and you vaguely alluded to this, but I think we need a bit more information. The multi-agency partnership set up to discuss disorder and serious violence within Cwmbran Town Centre. You've then got the multi-agencies listed, and the point is made they do not include any drug prevention agencies. Should they also be involved, do you think?
Yes, so apologies. Engage are going to be a part of that. So we do have a contact that we already have approached in relation to that specific meeting. And we do have further links with drug agencies as well. So I sit on the drug threat group with Gwent Police, and we will be utilising all those contacts as well to ensure that sort of outreach work or specific support work is able to be put in place for those people that are discussed on that within that forum, I should say.
Yeah, could you say who they were again, because I missed that?
So for the Cwmbran Town Centre meeting, as you mentioned, it will be Engage. Yes,
right.
So they will be sitting on and be a big part of that moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Stuart, got a question?
Stuart's got a query.
Yeah, no, this is one, thank you. I remember this one well because part of this issue was actually where we got rid of the underpass, remember? And this then went forward. So one of the things, I don't want involvement with it, but Cwmbran Community Council would be nice to get a report back on this occasionally, because we obviously got some involvement with this as an agency. I don't think it's appropriate for Cwmbran Community Council to be involved with the agency because you guys are doing that, but it'd be useful for Cwmbran Community Council to know about what was happening there because it's on our patch. So you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it might be that we could even look at funding it because we've got CCYP sat there as well, haven't we? And I hope they're involved with it because we do fund a considerable amount of money there. And I'm just saying that that's something where the local community council would be quite useful, but not, I think, as an agency, but as an awareness thing. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to, as you mentioned, perhaps write a brief report of some sort, just to make sure that the community council are aware and that you do have as much information as we're able to share. Yeah. I think that's a really good idea. So I do thank you for that.
And we were also aware now there's actually a new town centre management set up as well. We seem to be quite keen on this.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of positives going around there at the moment. But you guys doing that, I think, and that underpass, which was a whole problem. We took 5 years on that as a project, and this was a major part of the problem in some ways, and I remember doing it. But thank you for that. I think it's very useful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Steve Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's a lot of focus on schools, education and youth support to prevent serious crime. But what are we doing to tackle the problem with adults committing such crimes or involved with bringing young people into gangs or the county lines?
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of, as we've mentioned, St Giles, so they do have a lot of expertise in terms of the county line situation. They also do have a lot of places within England and other areas within Wales that they also support. So the links that we are able to share through St Giles allow us to ensure that we are sort of kept up to speed, so to speak, on the issues that are going back and forth to the different areas. And I think it is, in terms of sort of adults, it's a very similar process in some respects, in that, you know, we will try and access as much support, depends on engagement. St Giles do go up to, I believe it's 25, so they do also cover sort of that small area above the age of 18 as well, so it is sort of a longer support period. And in addition to that, there are we do link in with social services, so, you know, with the looked after children, etc., that will go up to, again, 25, as does youth service. So it is something that we do look into, but we do work very, very closely with Gwent Police, who in turn work closely with other police forces to ensure that if there are adults coming into our area, that we are able to be notified of and sort of captured, so to speak, in terms of names and identities, etc., that is then dealt with again on multi-agent speak, but via the police forces that are involved.
If I could just add, we also have a local Torvine serious and organised crime group, so a lot of that then, you know, focuses on adults then, you know. We've got a whole host of tools and powers that are available to us for young people and prevention and things like that, but as you say, with adults, you know, they're captured perhaps in other areas, and one of them through the serious and organised crime group. But also, if there's any adult that is causing particular issues, we would hold one of our problem-solving group meetings under Section 115 of the Crime Disorder Act to enable us to share information about that and put a plan in place to then to tackle the issues surrounding that person, whether that be serious violence, whether that be any kind of disorder or issues that they're causing in the community. We have that arena. And I can see Sian's got a hand up. Well, it was up, Sian, I saw it. If Sian wanted to come in on there.
Yeah, I just wanted to just add to that, is that people don't, very, very rarely are people just violent. They're involved in a broad range of other offences and issues, and it comes into community safety's arena a lot. Like I say, you've got the problem solving group, you've got a lot of them end up being homeless, so you've got your Wallet, which is also another charity which is led by people who've actually been in that situation themselves, again very much like St Giles, so they're able to deal with them in a much better way than we ever could. But these people that come into our area, because obviously we were always in the same office before, weren't we, and obviously COVID changed that a little bit, and hopefully we will be soon. We work very closely. These things are picked up very quickly, and we pencil in the meetings and get all the agencies in as quickly as possible. But like I said, they're very rarely do people just violent. There are drugs, there is homelessness, there's all sorts of alcohol abuse. We also have meetings obviously with Cumbrian Town Centre, and hopefully we'll have an information sharing document up very soon. At the moment, there's not free information exchanges at the moment. We're still waiting for those to go through, but once that's gone through, then we'll have we've also got Pub Watch, which is where I'm linked in as well. So there's a broad range of people that we can bring in, business crime partnership, all those sorts of things that we pull in as well. So we're, as a team, I think that we cover quite a massive range of areas, which obviously include the violence as well.
Thanks.
Okay. Right, if we can stick to the the supplementary questions on the question we are asking, please, because time is moving on. Next question is Steve Evans again.
Yeah, double trouble.
I was thinking that.
Yeah. This, on section 4.2.1, the question I want to ask is, this will require the sharing of relevant data and intelligence. What data and intelligence do we hold and share?
So we received the strategic assessment published in partnership with Gwent Police. So we share data and under that. So that's something that we would look at our priority areas and look at our work plans taken from the strategic assessment. Section 17 of the Crime Disorder Act. Yeah, I've said it about 4 times already and it's gone. Sorry. We can share relevant information with partners under that actually, attend those meetings, that we can allow for the free and open disclosure with professionals under that remit. We also have the WASB that was in place, although that needs to be renewed now. So that looks at all partners under the Community Safety Hub. So we would share information freely then with everyone that's listed in that, and that would encapsulate the actual physical office of the physical room of the Community Safety Hub. So any partners that were signed up to the act that came into there, we wouldn't have to have a standalone meeting to discuss something. They would be able to discuss that within that, and a lot of the multi-agency meeting and problem solving that we were doing just happened within the arena of that office then. So there's lots of ways that we share information. A lot of the data that we kind of collect that we would perhaps, for example, if there was a problem in the town centre, we would come to Sian and Sian would give us the crime stats for that area that would unpick the time of that, the duration of it, specific times, hotspots and that. So we would, the information that we need, we're able to get from pretty much most partners. There isn't anyone, I would say, at the moment that we're not able to request information. If we're not, we would hold a specific problem-solving group meeting to share that information under that arena.
Whose hands up?
Oh, Sian.
Yeah, Sian. Yeah.
Just to add to that is that the community safety team will attend my local tasking as well, thanks to the great ability to share this information. They come to my local tasking, which is with our inspectors and sergeants, and they have a massive input into our demand drivers, people and the locations, and they've got a massive knowledge base to assist us, and obviously then we've got the information to give back to them. I also produce a tasking document which I share with them, and also the statistics. I give them the weekly statistics as well, which goes on to their is it GIS system, which I have access to as well. So that's massively helps the free exchange of information and quick references as well, and able to pull up statistics and information on locations and people.
Thanks, Charlotte. It's remiss of me not to mention that, because I think that's the day-to-day stuff that we do all the time, isn't it? It just goes without saying that information is shared. And I think the rapport that we have with Gwent Police, the trust, from the teams, it's all very well having an agreement in place, or we can share information, but actually having trust in partners to talk to discuss problems, to problem solve, and that is second to none in this area.
Yes.
Huge thanks to Sian for being for part of this team. And I think the initial collaboration that we set up, which started the community safety hubs coming together, was just our team and the Cadro at the time. That was something that we did a lot of work to do, because so much of our work is intertwined, of sharing that information. It's
and I do get a lot of a lot of other areas, you know, the Caerphillies, the Blaenau Gwents are from a west perspective, and also we've had from the east perspective, Newport and so on. They want to come up and look at our hubs. They want to know about our information sharing. So they're always wanting me to send them information about it. So I think that they're trying to follow suit as well. So I think we're definitely leading, and I think your team are absolutely amazing, Kate.
Oh, so you, Sean, thank you.
Okay. Right, sir. Steve? Next
Excellent
question.
answers.
Nick Jones?
Yes, thank you. Come on to our favourite subject, really, data, statistics. And I think this question has come up many times because statistics can be produced to provide answers to any question that you want, and you can frame the answers to questions with statistics. The actual question is, the data included in Appendix 1 seems quite misleading. Would it be more appropriate to calculate a rolling average? Now, I understand that you've already say that you've got a whole host of things that you look at, and I'm absolutely certain that this particular appendix is just an example of the sorts of things that you hold. What we wanted to know is as to whether you have to produce, if this is a statutory format, or whether you have any scope to change it in any way. And the reason why I asked this particularly is that when you look at the final comment in Appendix 1, this monthly percentage change, now unfortunately you've got 2 years worth of, and two in January and February, starting into the third year of statistics. And when it actually focuses on a monthly change, you know, some people can be lulled either into a false sense of security or into a false sense of panic. You know, I look at my ward, you know, in New Inn. Apparently we had 100% increase in, you know, and I panicked at that. Goodness me, you know, how dreadful is crime in New Inn. You know, and there are other wards there which, you know, Llantarnam had a 0 monthly change. But when you actually look at this, if you look at the trend over time, it's a much more meaningful measure. So, you know, we just sort of say on there, calculate a rolling average. Would that be more, you know, just take the, you know, the averages over a 12 months and then move that average forward, because then you can see a trend. And I just thought this would be particularly useful because obviously tackling crime isn't something that happens overnight. You know, it is the result of a lot of hard work over a long period of time, and it would be far more reassuring to see crime reducing, because I feel that, you know, perhaps that is the picture that we've got, and if it spikes, then we can actually have a look at the reason and the underlying trends. Just wondering whether that'd be more useful, or whether your hands are tied by statutory methods of reporting data.
Thank you. It's a brilliant point, and I think that is, our hands aren't tied. We can shape this however we want to shape this. You know, this is the data provided by the analyst in Gwent Police, but as you say, 100% increase has gone from 1 to 2. Perhaps, you know, so it doesn't give a true reflection of what that is. Some areas, if it's included the town centre, there's a huge, you know, spike in that. If you look at the numbers, they don't actually, I think Cwmanisgau, I think, you know, a 250% increase, and the Crossy North 600. These are massive stats if you look at that, and they can be skewed in any way that we need to do. We can make them look positive, we can make them look really awful to say, you know, how horrendous it is in this area. But absolutely, I think it's within our gift to say this is what we want to look at. These are the stats that we want to unpick. How many crimes were there? And I think one of the things that the team, that we've changed our way going forward, you were saying, oh, we want to reduce crime, but how, you know, to reduce it from what? What we need to look is there positive action? You know, people that have come into our arena, have they exited the arena with a positive outcome? Have they re-engaged in crime? Have they gone on to commit anything? Have we kept them, you know, deferred them from engaging more in that? So I think it's hugely within our gift now to shape this and provide our own stats. We can use this data. As Kelly said, you know, we do mapping on, Sian said that we put on our GIS system so that we can look at hotspot areas. But I think there's a whole host of work that we're just starting to kind of unpick around this. And I don't want to go too much back on the definition of what we're looking at, but actually, what do we need to see? What crime statistics do we need to give a true reflection of what it is like in that area? And that coupled with then of how people feel in their area. Well, you know, it's saying that there's been 100% increase. Well, this is one crime perhaps, so we need to convey that information to the community to say, well, you know, actually this is what we're doing, you know, the perception of crime. So I think it's not done that we are governed to have to use those stats. These stats are as they are, but we can interpret them and put the narrative and that behind, which I didn't want to put too much information behind this because I knew it would, you know, bring up a whole host of questions to say, well, you know, if we went the data between every single one of those crimes, and I know looking at those, Sian will know, oh, August, oh, that was so was out of prison then, that's why it spiked. We know why those crimes are that, but just kind of wanted to leave it to the committee to have a conversation now around what we do with those statistics. And absolutely, I totally agree that they can be skewed in any way. We can make it look positive or negative. But it's within our gift now of what we want to do going forward with our own strategy on this, of how we kind of want to unpick that.
Okay, I particularly asked this because I think it's really important that we kind of get this into perspective. I'm sure that the reason for putting this particular act into place is that there are towns and cities and areas, not only within Wales but within the UK, that have got far more serious problems. Now, you know, we have to accept that any crime is both serious and violent, you know, depending on the lens, and one is too much. But you know, the one thing that I am particularly concerned about is not painting too adverse a picture of Torfaen, because we are perhaps, in perspective, you know, relatively lucky, you know, compared to even our immediate neighbours, and certainly, you know, on a much wider UK scale. And I think that you know, Sian, particularly your team, and you know, and exactly the same, everything that the council officers are doing is having an impact on the communities in which we live in. And I think we need to sing some of those praises of the successes that we're having, and I don't want statistics to be taken out of you know, out of context, you know, for the area that we live in. You know, we're extremely lucky, you know, in a lot of our communities, that unfortunately there are things which are more social trends rather than and probably it's due to the lack of consequence rather than the lack of effort, you know, that people are putting into, you know, to try and control some of these behaviours. It seems, unfortunately, I don't want to get off on this at the moment, but you know, unfortunately, we are in a situation where people think they can do what they want because there is no perceived consequence of them getting caught. But I do want to paint a, you know, a positive message with some of the stats that we put out here in Torfaen. And if you have, and what I was really pleased to hear is that you have some control on what stats you put out. I was really not expecting an answer to say, I'm sorry, these are the stats that we have to give you because they are prescribed. So very happy about that, and I look forward to some problem. I'm sure you look at the stats and you use them appropriately. We're absolutely certain of that. But it's about the output that we put both to ourselves as councillor and to the community, that we have to paint the right message with those kind of statistics. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, and I think you're so, you know, so right. I think it's, you know, we don't want communities to feel scared. We need to be proportionate in our approach to things. So I think because, for example, if somebody had a knife, we don't want to go, right, we're going to have a huge knife amnesty and everyone's thinking, oh, it's a huge issue, I'm really scared now. Actually, we've got to be proportionate to the need and to the demand. And I think a lot of the work then, just like you say, comes on that positive message. And we are all for that. We don't perhaps promote all the better side of things. So people focus on an issue, and we just need to counterbalance that, I think, a bit better with the positive work that is doing, and lots of the agencies that we work with are, you know, promoting what they do. So yeah, you know, fully agree with everything you've said, and And like, you know, so not to reiterate really, but just to go in that we can use those statistics and we can draw on what we need from those. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Chuck, do you want to come in on that?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to reiterate that the changes year on year has also a lot to do with the way that we record things. Before, many years ago, if somebody didn't want to make a complaint, it wasn't crimed. But now, if we know that even if the smallest of offence has been committed, it is crimed. And also, one neighbour dispute, one argument over a parking space can generate 4 or 5 crimes. It has to be looked at in perspective, especially like violence without injury. A lot of that would just be closed as ASB, kids causing problems on the corner, kids shouting at me, whereas it would have been kids suitably advised, moved on. Now it's recorded as a public order offence. So that has to be taken into consideration as well.
Thank you, Sian. John, do you want to come in?
Yes, please. I mean, just in response to what Nick says, I'm going up to New Inn this afternoon, and my feeling of terror is rising almost as we speak. Yeah, I mean, and also to look at my own ward, Cumbernaskoi, you know, it has risen by 250% to become the least crime-filled ward in the borough. You know, it is not helpful. I mean, a previous when I stood for Pontypool ward some years ago, my political opponent there actually went around saying that Pontypool was more crime-ridden than Moss Side in Manchester, which he derived from the statistics that we've got here. The fact is that there's a small number of people who live in Pontypool ward. It's got a town centre in it, which naturally gets a number of crimes. Right, so I'm labouring the point, but what I'm saying is that it follows on from what Nick was saying about trying to get a positive attitude towards our communities. I think we need to have a look, because once a statistic is available, it will be used. And it seems to me that if we should have a good look at what statistics are useful and what we can cease using, because you know there are people who there are a lot of people go into the car park in the town centre and see young people there and are immediately terrified by them. They're great. I go and talk to them all the time, but they're absolutely fine. You know, we've got to try and do something to bring down the level of perception about things. And as I say, the problem is if a statistic is there, somebody, for good or ill, is going to use it. So I think it might be helpful if at some time we could have a good look together at which statistics we want to keep and which we want to say these are not useful. They don't give a real perception of things.
We'd welcome that. Would we really happily work with you on that to see, you know, as a committee, what would work going forward. I mean, we're still in the infancy of this now, but absolutely would really, you know, welcome your involvement in that. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, let's move on. Councillor Nick, you next again.
I've got my hand up.
Go on then, Stu, make this the last one.
Yeah, I got my hand up on that.
Go on then.
Yeah, I was going to make the point was sitting on the community council down in Cwmbran, we always get Cwmbran Town Centre, which you've got a project for, and we get Pont Newydd. The reality in Cwmbran is that these things don't bear any relationship to what's actually happening on the ground, and you put a project in. So I agree with what John's having to say on this, but the reality in Torfaen is obviously because of its very nature, the ward that contains a town centre always has the highest statistic. So that really doesn't sort of reflect that. And Pont Newydd, for other reasons, is next door to the town centre and always seems to have the next highest. So that the problem you've got with these stats is actually reflecting that.
That's
And
because of Northville.
The health warning from your colleagues when they come to the community council is that very thing. This is this when they come to our community council. They say it all the time, and we have it as borough councils when we've had meetings with them. And so this, as John has said, I totally agree with, because when we get on the ground there, or we get a community council meeting, we get a different picture. So there must be a better way or a different way of doing these stats. They are what they are, but they can be presented in very many different ways. That's all I was going to say.
Right, thank you,
Can I just pop in quickly there? Sorry, I'm just conscious of time, members, and you have got another report. And just to remind you, obviously, scrutiny, you shouldn't really be looking at ward issues. I know the temptation is there, but I know you're all going to want to.
Just using that as an illustration of the problem that Kate and Co have got. Absolutely. Because it's the picture you've got. I just knowing that because I know the detail. All right.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Obviously, members have made that point and Kate has responded to that. So I have noted that down as a potential recommendation for you for later. Thank you, member.
Right then, Nick Jones, you got another question?
I certainly have. In 4.2.1 states that the committee may wish to suggest that a more formal structure is put in place in addition to the Community Safety Hub, for example, a Torvine Serious Violence Prevention Partnership. In relation to that, or in light of that, is serious violence in Torvine a significant enough issue to need a further formal structure of its own?
I don't think so. I think it's the ethos of everything that's around it. I think it's the safer streets element of it. I think it's a whole host of fear of crime that perhaps need to be looked at rather than this be standalone. But I wanted to, excuse me, put that in to just go, is this something that the committee feel that we need that standalone? But we've already talked about the partnerships that we've already got in place. Personally, I feel that this could bolster on to what we've already got, as long as we talk about it as a standalone item and ensure that it's covered off. I don't really see that we need a separate partnership board. I don't think it warrants that. I don't really think we've got resources to have another meeting just for another meeting's sake. We cover these kind of things, but just wanted to bring that to the committee to just get your views on, is this something that you felt would warrant that, or perhaps do we want to see when the duty is enacted to say, well, actually what pressures and that are on the council, what are we looking at when we're looking at perhaps more the data and the stats and that behind this? Is this something that perhaps becomes quite massive in its own right then, that we might need to look at? So yeah, just wanted to get your views really on if you thought that this needed to be a standalone partnership, or if we can kind of incorporate that within our existing community safety.
Okay, I'm glad you asked the question, get your views on it, because that gives us an opportunity to give our views on it. I mean, very, very personally, I kind of think that we have committees reporting to committees, and maybe we get bogged down with committees and never actually kind of get to dealing with problems. As a personal, opinion. And if you wanted to hear my views, then I think you've got an ideal opportunity now, should you so wish, to have a look at the various things and try and look at, maybe it would be more appropriate to cut down on the number of things that you have, amalgamate them and to deal with various statutory duties that we might have as a council, and maybe for that one committee to meet more often rather than to meet every 3 months and having to wait for the reports from other committees. It's a sort of kind of a difficulty that we've always got with public bodies, then, shall we say. So yes, I mean, I would welcome a serious hard look at the committees that we've got, the structures that we've got, and maybe if we could, I mean, obviously the danger with that is then they would have such a huge scope that these meetings might potentially be overlong if too many people want to have their say. If they could be kept on point, then there's a good argument to say, let's meet once, let's get it done, let's have a look at an action and see what the effect has been in a month's time, rather than in 3 months' time. But that's only because you gave me the opportunity to put my views in. But yes, thank you. It was the questions answered. But thank you very much.
I think that's why we come to scrutiny. We don't want to come to scrutiny to just say, oh, this is what we do, isn't it amazing? We don't need any help. This is just, everything's done and dusted. You know, we want to bring something to scrutiny that we can meaningfully move forward and get some input on how are we going to do this better for the community, what is going to work. So I think, you know, we absolutely come to scrutiny with an open mind of how we can do things better, and you know, we'll you know, take your guidance on how we can do that. So yeah, absolutely. You know, that's why we wanted to bring this up. And because it's still quite new, rather than just look reflectively on what we've done over the past year, what are we going to do, and have some meaningful change of how we're going to progress that. I also just wanted to quickly say about the Community Safety Hub. It's unbelievable how much the team get crammed in that meeting. It is on point. They are firing. This is the issue. Deal with it. Problem solve. It's a fantastic meeting, and I've got no doubt that there isn't anyone in the team that would let people, you know, label or go into the minutiae of these things. They hold them so tightly, and I think that's why we've got such good engagement by partners, because they're not just sat there thinking, oh, I've got to wait another hour to my point, whatever. They get on. So I think we could incorporate that very well within our existing systems. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody's hand up? Veronica? Yeah, I can see Faye. I can see you, Faye. Veronica?
I'm going to refer to this, but Faye has had her hand up for a long time, so okay. I think it's fair that she goes first.
My picture's on top of Faye. I can't see her. Okay, Faye.
Thank you, Veronica. I don't want to sort of pour cold water on what was said about the violent crime statistics, because they are, you know, 2020, 21, 22. But it's only a few years ago, in my part of Cwmbran, we have had some very, very violent crimes where whole families been wiped out due to domestic violent crime, involved the fire brigade. There have been a few where there's been other domestic violent crimes where women have been murdered. And I don't want us to lose that when we're looking at statistics. And I want us to very much concentrate on looking at root causes of domestic violence and other things, and making sure there is enough money spent, and I know there's not enough money around, and that boards meet and really discuss and share data where they need to stop this sort of thing ever happening again. Because in a very small village area, we've had quite a few over a few years, and I'm quite horrified by that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Jones. And I think what we need to look at the meaningful stats. You know, domestic homicide reviews. It's unforgivable how it's happened and everything, and we need to unpick why that's happened. You know, I'm engaged in you know, 2 domestic homicide reviews at the moment. You know, why did they happen? So there's lots of things I think that we kind of need sort of unpicking around those big areas, but we need to then focus on those ones, and perhaps the smaller elements we don't want to get bogged down into perhaps over reporting on things that we don't need to, but those kind of areas absolutely we need to put a full focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica.
Right, just going back to this, I think what is so important is that the lower level crime is reduced as far as possible. And I'm sure some of you are aware, we've just started in Cross Ceiliog and Lanneravon with rolling out the Smart Water project. And that is, the police came to us to ask us if we'd like to do it. And we've embraced that, and the residents are picking up their packs at the moment. But it does mean that we also get this signage then going up saying that this is a smart water area, and it will reduce, one hopes, the levels of criminality that are going on, which are very low level. And perhaps stop some of the instances we've had. You know, our figures in the one area in Cross Ceiliog North shot up last month and very recently because of 1 or 2 youths committing crimes that this hopefully will prevent.
Okay. Somebody, well, John, you can hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to reassure Faye that at no time was I ever suggesting that we should get rid of statistics. It was really to do what she's saying. Let's make sure that the statistics we keep are meaningful and useful. That's my concern. Yeah.
Nick, you got your hand up again? Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to come in on the back of John and reassure Faye that anything that I was saying wasn't in that line. I think what we've got to be very mindful of, we're just coming out of a horrible lockdown. We've got communities that have been locked up in their homes for 2 years. Now that in itself is going to have bottleneck. We're going to have people letting off steam unnecessarily, but I think what we've got to be very mindful of when we produce statistics would suggest that Crossacaliog, for example, has got a 600% increase in crime. No wonder you're sending smart water out there. It's not really representative, and I would just certainly hope that residents in Crossacaliog North weren't thinking, well, I've had a 2-year lockdown, but now it's not safe to go out because we've got 600% increase in crime. I'm going to stay at home. We've got to be very, very careful, as Councillor Killick has said, to make sure that these statistics are meaningful. Because on the wider point there, what we have to truly remember is that if we can build proper communities where people are happy to engage and be out and about and meeting in safe environments, that an awful lot of some of this, shall we say, lower level crime will get called out, and it'll get called out by responsible members of communities. And if we can encourage people to feel safe to go out and to meet and to to become proper communities again, that maybe that would be a really helpful exercise. And we don't want statistics or that this sort of false feeling of insecurity, especially amongst some of the the older members of our community who are perhaps the best placed people to put behaviour into context and to call things out. But if they're missing from our communities, then we might have a serious problem going forward. It's about how do we really effectively build communities that can self-regulate and perpetuate to a certain extent and actually set the standards that are acceptable within our communities. And I think that this is a very big piece of work that we've lost it within our communities to a certain extent, and we've got to find some ways, especially post-pandemic, to be able to bring this sense of ownership and sense of pride in our communities back into focus. And hopefully, Faye, that some of the things that you're seeing in your wards might have the spotlight shined on them from within the community, and these sorts of behaviours might not bottle up and might not spill over into the horrific things that you've been seeing. So it's a big body of work, and it's a very difficult thing to try and deal with. And rather than sort of harping back onto, things used to be better in the olden days, well, perhaps to a certain extent they were, and maybe we've got to revisit some of those things that that used to happen and used to prevent some of the the more sort of horrific things in our communities. But sorry about that. There's a bit of a rant, but it's it's important that we do get this into perspective. Thank you.
Can I call Rebecca in, please?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just quickly. I'm just conscious that officers and PC Weekly are only due to be with us for another 5 minutes, and there are a couple more questions still to be asked.
Very quickly, Chair, I've got my hand up.
Yeah, can we stick to the questions, please?
Yeah, no, I'm just very quickly saying that the examples of local community action we've got in lots of wards, certainly in Cwmbran, and they're an answer to what Nick was saying, very proactive work, and some of the work that Kate has done with the group, with the hub, are being taken forward, because I've alluded to that before. That's all I was going to say. There are good partnerships working there, and they're certainly being supported. That's all I was going to say.
Thank you. Rebecca, you still got your hand up? Right.
Sorry, Chair.
Just quickly, I do agree with it, but I'd just like to say I think preventative work, especially around schools and families, would stop violent crime and other crimes in a lot of cases, and we don't spend enough money on that. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Steve Evans.
Thanks, Chair. You know, people seem to be doing other people's questions. It's got to stop.
Yeah, just stop.
How do we prevent a reoccurrence of serious violence activity? How do we support families of victims and also families of those who conduct serious violent crimes to prevent reoffending?
So I think we have touched on a lot of the preventative work. Partners and agencies that we use. We work very closely with them to look at preventative ways to engage in families, siblings through the MAPI system. So there's a whole host of things that we can do to prevent people being drawn into any kind of criminality or be exposed to that. So I think a lot of the work that we're doing, Kerry alluded to our first childhood experiences agenda, of focusing then a lot of the preventative work that we need to be doing, not just our teams, but the teams within the local authority and under the auspice of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. There's lots of that work that the council as a whole, and as a responsible parent, the council then looking at those and looking at better ways of ensuring that prevention services are linked up to ensure that those young people, adults, whatever, don't further get involved in criminality. We've often said that when we've had tools and powers available to us, when we used to have the ASBO, things like that, they were the very, very last point of call, that we never want to get to that. It's all about prevention. So the whole team, it's around getting in there early and putting all that support in place so that people don't go on to further engage in antisocial behaviour, in crime, that their families don't. So the prevention is the key. So I think it's, we've got good ways of working with other agencies. We've named a whole host of those today. So it's continuing that and keeping a grip. We're quite lucky within Torvine, although it's densely populated, it's quite contained geographically, so we know our areas really, really well. We've got social behaviour reduction coordinators for North, Middle and South that look at that. So I think they've got a really good grip on who people are in the communities, who the families are, who needs support and that. So yeah, I think there's always more work to be doing. There's always more resources for prevention, but I think those partnerships and that are in place.
Right, okay, right, last question. Can the existing team absorb the additional resource pressures to support complacently with the duty?
I think it's, again, because it hasn't been enacted, we're not quite saying what those measures our enforcements and that are, but I think what the team are already equipped to work on a multi-agency basis with additional partners. We have those links. I said at the beginning of the meeting, we're really lucky in Torvine that the team the council have invested in the community safety team. We haven't got that in other areas, but I mean the workload that the team have is off the chart sometimes, I think, and the more work they do, the more people are ringing into to ask for more support. So I think sometimes you're a bit of a victim of your own success, really. The more positive work that you do, it's great that people want to report more in, but actually the expectation then that things are dealt with quickly, it's a real pressure and that on the team. So, honestly, we haven't got enough resources. There isn't enough of the team as it stands to meet demand, but actually they work above and beyond. They do all of this stuff and will continue to, and anything that new comes in their way, they do. But there are never enough resources. And, if this is going out, additional support and resources is always a good thing. But I think the team manage what they do so well that we are very, very clever at looking at new ways, new inventive ways of doing this. Let's not recreate something. Let's work with stuff that we've already got rather than just make a whole industry out of something just because we need to. We need a whole new board, a whole new committee for this. Actually, you know, they do a lot of this stuff as their day-to-day work, but it's just bringing all that together with the support of additional partners.
Lovely, thank you very much. That's the end of the question. And now, Kate and Sian, if you and whoever's by the side of you, Kate, thank you very much for answering our questions, and thank you very much for attending our meeting.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all.
Invite you to leave now if you want to.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye.
Right, members, can I remind you that the meeting is still in formal proceedings and therefore still being webcast? Members, can I refer you now to the scrutiny activity and key question and invite you to offer your recommendations. Rebecca, will you formulate the recommendations with members?
Certainly. Chair, would members like to offer their recommendations first before I go through the notes I've made?
If I'm really honest, I think that maybe a better way is if you could read out what you've captured, and we can add to it rather than for us to just repeat what you've already captured.
No problem. Okay, so the first one I picked up on fairly early in the meeting was the links with the Probation Services on a more local level. So I didn't know if you wanted to form a recommendation around building those relationships. They said they had them on a regional, but whether more work could be done on that on a local level. Is that something? Yeah. There was the issue, I think, Councillor Killick, you raised this one about coming to community councils to discuss, as you may have opportunities for applying for additional external funding opportunities. Whether members would want to recommend that. There was more of an action point than a recommendation, but a seminar to discuss about the partner agencies that are involved, to give you more information on those, because you're asking questions about St Charles's Trust and various other agencies, so that's just as an action point. I didn't know if you wanted to make a recommendation that you mentioned about the way these messages are conveyed to the public, so I didn't know if you wanted to formulate something around taking a more proportionate approach in what is reported to the public so that more accurate information is given over. Because they obviously wanted to stress that they want to make communities feel safe. Then the only other one I had was the big one around statistics and a review as to what statistics they are pulling together, how they're using them and whether they are the most appropriate. That's all I captured, Chair, so I don't know if members have anything they want to add to those ones or whether they have any that I've missed.
Yeah. Come on in, Faye.
Sorry, my mic was off. Just to say that we did say about working, or rather the girls said, working with the police more closely to analyse the need in order to pinpoint what it is we need to do with a sort of bespoke way of working. So they were analysing the need in certain areas, and I think it was something to do with anti-social crime and data sharing. We wanted smarter targets, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Killick?
Yeah, it was to do with that, the last thing that you said there, Rebecca. I think it might be to do with how that's worded, yeah, to ensure that it helps officers most. I think the question is that we need to there should be a discussion with members about how to rationalise statistics in order that they are meaningful and useful. I think that sort of question would probably help officers best in terms of how that is done.
Thank you, Councillor Killick.
Yeah, the other one was I'm not sure if I don't think you said is just I think that our recommendation would be that this doesn't require another partnership, but actually becomes immersed in the partnerships that already exist. I mean, apart from anything else, I could see that a new partnership, spending half its meeting discussing whether something, was a serious crime or not. Let's just crack on and do it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Nick Jones, I think.
Yes, I mean, that was the point that John Killick's just picked up on. Thank you, John. It was, but just to take that a little bit further, when we were talking about statistics, I think it's really important that that officers actually understand that there are internal statistics which are very, very helpful to them, and there are external statistics which are very helpful to the public. And I think that that sometimes we present statistics, or we use statistics for two different purposes, and again, it's very difficult to know how to word this, because maybe the officers and maybe the police forces and all the partner bodies might be interested in the minutiae of the statistical side of it, whereas the public might be more interested in the direction of travel, and what would be a lot more helpful perhaps in the public area is that painting of the picture. Is it safe to go out? Is effectively the message that the public get from the statistics, and it's because we've got to have that fine balance between recognising that crime is an offence against all of us, but yet it is still safe to go out and it's still safe to go into communities. And how we actually do that and achieve that is very difficult to actually put in a recommendation. But the actual recommendation is for them to look at the people that they're talking to with the statistics that they are producing.
Yeah.
And have a two-tiered approach.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that they should hide underlying statistics from the public, but should the public want to go and get those minutiae, that they should be freely available on the website. But stuff that we produce public facing, in our literature, should be more simplistic and not just be knee-jerk reactions to something that happened yesterday, because I'm sure that things are really serious. The newspapers and so different channels and social media will deal with those individual things. Certainly don't want to sort of minimise on the impact of those very serious things on the community, but we've got to get a proportionate balance as to the picture that we paint to our residents as such.
Thank you.
Good luck with the wording that one. Sorry, apologies.
Okay, Councillor Fay-Jones.
There was something about civil orders, and they wanted to look into the definition more. I think it was the police lady said about that we use civil orders, but we need to look into the definition. That was the one thing. And the other thing was many partnerships in the last couple of years have come and gone. We got St Giles working now in this area. I just wanted to ask something about funding. Could we make sure that, we know that funding is going to be there to meet the requirements of the bill? Because I think funding has been the problem in the past when some of these projects and third-party organisations have had to leave.
Okay, Councillor Stewart-Ashley.
Yeah, I'm somewhat in that direction. I agree with the idea we shouldn't have any more meetings than we need, but she was very clear about that, and I think John and Nick have been clear about that as well. So I agree with that totally. As far as the funding was concerned, short-termism is a plague of all these sorts of groups, and I think everybody's had that view. I'd like to know who the reporting minister is. That would be quite useful to find that out. And in terms of what their intention is supporting this, because it's, I think, really, really essential. Not so much the minister as the department, and report back to that, because we got tied up with definition here. And I think that's not as important as the intent as to what we do. I also the PSB reporting back mechanism, we did have a bit of dialogue about that. I thought the regional PSB and the local PSB and the report back in terms of that's more of a note, I think, than a recommendation. I think it's important that we note it and see how important that is for Kate's department and this whole process. That might be more about the general work they do, but it's important that the violence bit, as we've ascertained that we think the violence and serious violence should be part of the work of what she does on the hub, they do on the hub, not just a standalone thing. I think that if we're going to go down that line, then it ought to be included in there, and what measures there are should be included in that. At least there's a reporting mechanism under this act back through all of that. And then the other bit that I did draw out, and I thought was really quite nice to hear, Faye was into this one as well, I think, was the organisations involved in the voluntary sector with this, the bit about supporting them and knowing who they were. I got into that because I wanted to know, we did that in questions, and it came through there. And I think we need to know who they are. So if they've got problems, and we want them to come back to council, again, it's an identification of the good work they all do, and report back. Maybe that's not but it is a recommendation, really. I said about all that. That's good warm stuff, you know.
If most of your comments I will note down as rather as action points because you're asking for information back on those.
Yeah, we are.
And just with regards to the
recommendations.
No, and just with regards to the PSB comment you made, just to remind you that today you sit as the Crime and Disorder Committee, which is also your remit. Although you're the Prosperous Committee, you also stand as the Crime and Disorder Committee. So hence why this issue comes under your remit.
Can I just put one thing I did forget? Sorry. There is a relationship with other people, and we mentioned community councils, but there are those sort of statutory responsibilities. I mean, it's not just community councils. It could be the ambulance service and fire and all those sort of bodies which are on the PSB.
Yeah, Councillor Killick.
Yeah, I mean, the argument about short-termism, I'm not sure that there is much point in pursuing that. Sorry. Because I've been arguing that since 1992, and the answer from ministers will always be, you actually have that facility now. It's called the rate support grant. You know, you can put something into your budget. So I'm loath to sort of go up a blind alley, really. Also, I have a concern about what we might be saying with regards to collection of statistics, because I'm not aware of any statistics that a public body has that you can say, well, those I'm going to make available to the public and those I'm not. Mm-hmm. Much as I'd like to, because almost what I was saying earlier suggests that suggests that I was saying that, but I don't think it can happen. So again, I don't know if we can frame that in a way, frame that question in such a way as it becomes useful to officers, both in the police and in our department.
John, I don't think either you or I were suggesting that we should hide anything from the public.
No, I know we weren't, Nick. No, exactly that. I know you don't want to. I know. No, I don't want to. It's more a matter of how we frame the question so that it doesn't appear that way.
I guess it just goes back to the point that you made earlier in the meeting, that the information that was contained in the appendix gives a portrayal of a situation that isn't as it is. So just for them to be, I suppose, mindful of the data, how they report it, as to the impression that is given on to the person who is reading the statistics.
Yeah, and that's almost
know your audience.
Yeah. Perhaps what I'm thinking towards. I'm loath to say this, but whether there might be a small working group between members that department, the police, to look at exactly those things. That might be a recommendation we could make.
Well, I've noted the point that you made earlier, so discussion with members to rationalise statistics to ensure they are reasonable and useful. So I think you've covered that off, yeah.
But would suggesting a working group be helpful?
That's within your gift members. If you wanted to make a subgroup to look at that, and
Can I just say with regard to that, what is quite interesting is when you see how the information is used by insurance companies.
Yeah.
You know, people don't always realise that, and some of the reports you get on, I'm trying to think what it is, the various estate agency groups that now advertise and will give details of an area and the crime statistics, which can be, because they take them from these sort of small figures, if you like, can be quite misleading.
Yeah, I mean, can I also say something, if I may? There is a whole raft of statistics in all our communities.
Can we have some order? Because I've had my hand up a while.
Sorry, Steve. Please go. Sorry, I wasn't aware you were there.
Yeah, I did ask Steve to come in. Come on, Steve.
Thanks. You know, it's farcical today because there's no order at all today. No, I'm quite annoyed, really. The point I want to ask is, what would be their strategic objectives, and what would it be their outcome from that?
Yeah.
So, sorry, that's more to phrase it as a question. So can you, in terms of a recommendation, can we phrase that?
Well, what we want to know is what they're proposing to do with the hub and everything else. What's their long-term goals? What they hope to achieve? And what report will come back regarding percentages, statistics, and anything that, you know, it's crime related to that serious violence.
So you recommend they define the outcome and how they're going to monitor those to determine effectiveness of the work that they're doing.
Because they still got to make, whether it be statistics or not, they still got to come back with some sort of formulation of figures and statistics.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Ashley, did you have a separate recommendation now, or? You're on mute, Councillor Ashley.
All I was going to say was, just a minute, get rid of this.
Councillor Jones?
Yeah, all I was going to say was I was aware that there are ward statistics for every ward in the borough, and they give a set of statistics for every crime. We get those at community council, and they would give this type. So there are, you know, that is available, that stuff.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, so it's, there are, you know, but we don't. They're not given out normally because they don't think they're relevant. So there are different ways of presenting these statistics, and it's a picture of what happens, and that can be done on a month-by-month basis. And that can be available. It is available to Kate, and it's available to the police. So whether that level of detail needs to go out or not is an interesting question.
I think we've covered that off in a review of the statistics that we use. Thanks, Ashley.
No, but what the problem is, we can debate this endlessly if we want to, is getting the relevant statistics, which I think is the word we need.
That's what we've recommended, already recommended.
No, I know. I was just adding to that. I agree with that. Yeah. And that is the problem. It's not just violence, it's reoccurring problems, because the definition that we had problem with, we actually need to find out what the word serious violence did. Have we had that already?
Thank you. Councillor Jones, have you got a separate recommendation?
Yeah, it was a sort of question to the board that perhaps I should have put earlier, but it was just, does Kate's department have a forward-looking person who deals directly with the public?
Sorry, Councillor, I can't put a question forward now. It has to be a recommendation now at this stage, sorry.
Well, could I have a recommendation that there would be a person who deals with the public? I'm thinking of this because I've got something going on in one of my areas that involves quite serious crime or the potential of it, and I don't seem to get anybody to come out and deal with all the residents who are concerned about the violence committed by one person in their area. So is there somebody who comes out and deals with the public? I don't know how else I could phrase that.
I think that's the trouble in that, as such, making a recommendation on that, because you don't know whether there is somebody that does that or doesn't do that. Well, I'll note that as an action point and I'll get an answer for it. Rather than it be a recommendation, I'll pop it on the action sheet, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Chair, so unless anyone's got any other points, I will formulate those and type those up and get them sent over to members for you to review the wording. So please, obviously, take careful consideration of how they're recorded to make sure that they accurately reflect what you want to recommend.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Right, can we have an update on recommendations, Rebecca?
Yeah, so the next agenda item, members, is the update report on progress and impact of accepted recommendations. So you receive this report annually. This report then covers recommendations made since September 2020, to which you have made numerous recommendations over that period, a high proportion of which have been accepted or considered for adoption by the Executive. As a committee, it is therefore sensible to reflect on to what extent those recommendations have been embedded and acted as a catalyst for delivering service improvement. To ensure the impact of scrutiny is properly evaluated and recommendations are not just accepted but acted upon, a summary of progress has been produced by the service area against each scrutiny item that you've considered, including a progress update for each recommendation previously accepted or to be considered. Any that were rejected have obviously been removed. Examining what, if any, has been the impact of progress in the recommendation. Can I just please stress to members that you're not here to re-scrutinise each of these items. You're just here to determine whether you are satisfied with the progress made in implementing your recommendations or whether you wish for the committee to maintain monitoring of each of the items in the year ahead. So if I can refer you to Appendix 1, the first update on recommendations was for the development of the strategic vision for the Mon and Brecon Canal. Do you have any views on whether you are satisfied with it? So, Councillor Nick Jones?
Yes, I'd like to make a general recommendation on this report. Can we recommend that recommendation 1 followed by response, followed by progress implication of recommendations are all captured within recommendation 1? What I mean by that is we've got recommendation 1, we've got the response, and then suddenly further on in the report, we then get the progress implementation of recommendations. If they could be, as they are in some of the reports, the recommendation, the response and the update all with one paragraph, so we can review it as a whole, it'd be far more useful, and it would also ensure that maybe officers actually put an individual update on each individual recommendation.
Rather than a general. Thank you, Councillor Nick Jones. I'll note that.
Yep, thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't sure who's first. So Councillor Faye Jones.
You mentioned the Mon and Brecon Canal one, and I think we need to keep that, as even though we now have a canal officer, she hasn't as yet fed back to everyone, and there's still the same problems on stretches of the Mon and Brecon Canal, so I think that needs to be kept within the agenda of the basket. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to declare an interest because I'm on the committee. I also met with her yesterday, and so I will put that on there. And I totally agree with what both have said, because it needs to be kept on there, because at the end of the day, she hasn't met with everybody, and it does need to be progressed. There's a lot of work going on there, and although some of it was rejected, they're actually going down the lines of taking some of the stuff we put in which was rejected and doing it. So it'd be very interesting to get an expert. I'd like to see it back in the bag, to be honest.
Can we just comment on this as to whether we keep or I think that's the objective of this. We either say we're going to keep it. We don't need to give reasons as such, but
okay, let's put it in the bag.
It's either keep it or reject each of these.
It's a heck of a lot of expenditure in there.
Thank you, members. Okay, so if we move on to the next update section, and that was the review of the arrangements to comply with the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act. 2015. I believe you had a seminar on that as well yesterday. So, members, are you satisfied that your recommendation's been actioned, or again, is that an item that you'd like to maintain monitoring of?
Could I say that I haven't put my hand up, but I'd like to keep that on in the light of what's happening internationally.
I understand that there's an update report that will be presented in 12 months. So does that mean it will automatically come back to this committee anyway?
Well, obviously, with anything, it would go into your visioning session. So then it would be for you as a committee if you decided you want to take that as a full scrutiny item, or whether you just wanted an update that could come as in the form of a seminar.
Make an update.
So we could choose that at visioning.
Could choose it.
And I think that would probably be the recommendation then in that case.
Thank you. Okay, moving on then. If you take the next two updates together, because the first one was the economy and skills strategy, the objectives and scope, which you then fed into the draft strategy, which was the next update. So they've all been covered off in the one update, the second update.
I think it's quite obvious that that's a very major ongoing piece of work and should come back without any question.
Okay. Yeah. And then the last one was the compliance with planning permissions, conditions and Section 106 agreements.
Can that come back? Or is it just me who wants to go?
I think it needs to come back, especially given the problems there have been with staffing and delays in getting work through. So I think it's quite important you keep a tight hold on that.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you, members. Ben, unless you have anything further to add, that's...
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yes, thank you all very much.
Yeah, what I would like to say is thank you very much for your contributions for the last 18 months, I think, now, isn't it? I don't know whether I'll be seeing any of you next time, and obviously time will only tell. I think we've done a good job all between us. I know it gets a bit out of control sometimes, but blame me for that. I know we've been through some tough times, and I think... Well, I just hope all the best for everybody, and hope you all see you back next year. If I don't see you next year, thank you very much for contributing. Thank you, Becky, for what you've done behind the scenes, because without you, this would have been, from my point of view, a shambles. And, you really did a good job. I'd like to thank you very much. Put your own word here, close the meeting. I'll now close the meeting, and I'd like to thank everybody. Becky, anything to say before I say?
No, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. So thank you very much, everybody. And sorry you've been a bit upset today, Steve, but don't take it to heart.
No, that's all right. The best of luck to everybody in the future. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
thank you very much, everybody. And now close the meeting.